Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. Today I'm joined by former Western Bulldogs player and now Box Hill Hawks vice captain, and he's also part of the Box Hill Hawks program down there at Box Hill. Hello, Fergus. Thank you for joining me today. It's going to be great to talk to you.
Fletch, thanks for having me. Keen to get started.
It's going to be great to talk to you. So I guess, how did you sort of first get into football and what was it like?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think I grew up in Bendigo, and that was just what everyone did. My family's a really big football family. Cousins, siblings. I've got a brother who plays, so it was sort of just what you did. We grew up playing footy in the backyard. Me and my brother, and he was a bit bigger than me at that point, so he used to throw me around. But yeah, I mean, it was, looking back, a phenomenal way to forge some friendships that I still have now. But yeah, it was just sort of what everyone did then.
Now, you started playing your junior football career at the Sandhurst Football Club. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I love Sandhurst. It always has a soft spot for me. I think once when I got delisted, it was a real option whether, do I have another crack at VFL or would I look at going to Sandhurst? My father coached there in the 90s. I was club president up until this year. And my mum was also coach of the netball club. So it's a really special place for me. I was lucky enough to play in a couple of flags when I was there, one with my brother. So it's a really cool place that, I'm hoping at some stage over my footy journey, I'll get to head back there at some point. When that might be, I'm not too sure. But yeah, I always look fondly at my time there, both juniors and senior footy. But yeah.
Would you ever consider going back as a coach maybe in the future after your AFL and VFL career sort of finished up?
I think it's definitely a possibility. You never want to commit because, with job interviews, you always get asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I couldn't tell you to be honest, mate. So I'd like to think so. But I think, things have to align for the right things to happen in that situation. So I'd say it's definitely on the cards at some point, but when that happens, I'm not too sure.
Now, you were selected to the Western Bulldogs in 2016 with pick number 70. What do you remember from the lead up to the draft, and which clubs did you sort of talk to in the lead up to that draft?
Yeah, so I think it was a weird one. I was a pretty late bloomer in terms of my footy, so probably didn't hit my straps until under 18s at Sandhurst, and then didn't really get a look in bottom age. Didn't even get asked to try out for Pioneers, which is fair enough. Had a really good bottom age year with Sandhurst, and then trained with Pioneers top age 18s year. Didn't really get a great opportunity and got to sort of the final cut, and I think they rang me and said, "Oh, look, do you want to come as a train on?" And I sort of said, "Nah, look, haven't really enjoyed it. Happy to just go back and play Sandhurst." And then my 19s year, I was playing senior footy at Sandhurst, bit of school footy, and then Pioneers rang me and asked me if I wanted to play. So I played a few games over the back half of the year, and didn't really know there was any interest in myself as a draftable prospect. And then I was pretty sheltered. My father sort of was in the loop a little bit more, and he kept me out of it because he wanted me to focus on my schooling. Was doing VCE year 12. So it was an interesting one. Once I finished that, I sort of got inundated with information about clubs wanting to interview me. I think we talked to 7 clubs in the end, some a lot more thorough than others, and sort of heard whispers. I had mates saying, "Oh, look, I'm hearing this," and it was quite funny because I wasn't even hearing things. And then it got to sort of a week out from the draft, and I think I'd interviewed with the Dogs twice and Geelong a couple of times. Freo were really keen on a few things. So I actually had a navicular stress fracture in 2015, which isn't a great bone to have an issue with. It's ended a couple of careers, and it takes a long time to heal. So that scared a few clubs off. I know Freo were really hesitant on that. They wanted to see, constant scans and X-rays to show that it was fine when I just played a full year on it. So it was really interesting that caused a few curveballs. And then, draft night, the Dogs rang me, just said that they'd gone through my social media and it looked pretty good. And that was really interesting, and didn't probably click what that phone call meant. Probably should have given me an indication that something was on the cards, but it didn't really. I was at footy training, took the phone call, kept training, and then I went home. Didn't want to invite anyone round out of fear of being embarrassed. So I think I watched it with my mum, my brother, his girlfriend was there. So we had butter chicken that night. It was a good feed. And then, got to pick sort of about 66, I reckon. And it was sort of Geelong, Fremantle, Western Bulldogs, all within sort of a handful of each other's picks. So it was sort of around that area. I thought I might go. I think I actually said at the time, this might be roughly where I might go. And my old man just walked in and he sort of told me in a less than kind way to pull my head in. I don't think he thought I was a big chance. He thought, I think, more rookie draft. So we were actually arguing when I got picked up, which was quite funny. I didn't even hear it. My brother had to tell me that I'd just gone to the Western Bulldogs. Then it was just sort of an overflow of emotions. I think I got a bit teary just from the realisation that, I was going to get to play league footy, which was pretty cool.
It really is so exciting to sort of hear all of these stories of people's draft stories and sort of how they get into the game of football. And you were really sort of lucky in the way that you were able to go to a club who had just won the premiership in the year that you were drafted. Did that sort of make things a lot more special for you as well, Fergus?
It's a good point. It was interesting. It was definitely overwhelming initially when you get there. It's hard to say because you can only get drafted. Well, some people get drafted twice, but you only get drafted for that first time once. And to walk into a club, whether I would have felt differently had it been to a club that didn't just win a flag, it would have been interesting. But the Dogs fan base are very, very passionate, loving people, and they really embrace you when you got there. And they had, probably one of their biggest years ever in terms of fans coming to the ground post 2016 because they wanted to enjoy it and embrace the playing group that had brought them glory, which they'd waited so long for. So it was interesting to feel a part of it, but to also not really because you weren't there. That was an interesting one, but it was definitely confronting to have to walk in day one and train with a bunch of guys who had just won a grand final, which is what every kid's dream is, to then have to start training against them and trying to start picture, whose spot could I take out of this side? To try and think of it like that was just so, as I said, confronting. And not to mention that the VFL won the flag that year as well. So, there was 44 guys who won flags at the Western Bulldogs and Footscray in the same year. It was a really enjoyable, but confronting time.
Yeah, you're very lucky to be able to play with the Western Bulldogs. Who were some of your mentors? You mentioned your father. Was he probably one of the main mentors during your football journey?
Yeah, definitely. He was huge. He coached me for a number of years at different levels. He actually cut me from an interleague team that he was coaching. So that was an enjoyable conversation to have. And then I think he came in and woke me up and said, let's have some breakfast, and told me, you're not going to get picked in this year's interleague squad. And that was a fun conversation. But he was really big for me just in my development, kept me interested in the game because I think there was a bit there, as I mentioned before, I was a late developer. So I was really struggling with my footy around under 16s. Didn't enjoy it all that much. Struggled to get a kick at under 16 local level. And you have to start sort of wondering, is footy my go, or, am I just going to be one of those guys who enjoys drinking cans on the hill watching? And so he was massive in terms of keeping me engaged and I guess suggesting that there could be something down the track for me, which I was lucky enough to do. But also, my brother was a massive one. He was, I'd say arguably one of the best juniors in Bendigo, especially around that time. He won six or seven best and fairest throughout his junior career, and a really highly regarded footballer, played a bit of VFL footy. But he was also really big. We still train together every pre-season, off-season, and keep each other going. So he's been sort of big, especially over the last few years. I think he's played a real role in my journey. But I also had an uncle, Brendan, who played a few senior games for Carlton, who was really good at just offering bits of advice here and there. He never would say too much around my footy, which I really respected. He just flicked me a text sometimes when he watched a game of what he thought. And also, things like when I got delisted, he'd send me a text and offer his hand in support. So it was really nice in that regard.
You're really lucky to have a supporting family who are really involved with football. So that's great for you. I guess that you mentioned the conversation about being delisted and getting the text from your uncle. What was sort of, I guess, the lead up with Luke Beveridge to realising that you were delisted, and how difficult were those conversations?
Yeah, it was a difficult conversation on top of a difficult year. We were in the hub 2020. I think everyone had a different experience up there. I enjoyed a lot of parts of it, but also really hated a lot of parts of it. The fact that you were trapped in a footy bubble where, you had a bad week, either in a game or one of the intra clubs, wherever they were. And then all of a sudden you'd see your assistant coach in the coffee line, and then you'd see your head coach at lunch, and you'd see your other assistant coach at dinner. Like, you just never felt like you got away from it. And it was a really challenging time in that aspect. In the same conversation, we have to understand what was happening back in Victoria, which, you have to be really grateful that we got to keep playing. I was talking to my family, pretty constantly throughout, and they were sort of telling me the challenges they were facing back here in Victoria. So you had to sort of also understand that we were in a really privileged position to be able to keep playing footy and be able to be in Queensland. But I think, I probably got halfway through the year. I came off a really interrupted pre-season with a shoulder, and then I think I nicked a calf towards the back end of pre-season, which was a really horrific time to do that, because it sort of really stunted just getting form again. And so that was really frustrating. I think, as I said, about halfway through the year, I probably thought the writing was on the wall. There was a lot of talk about list cuts and, where I fell and all that. I think I had a really sharp realization one time when I was sort of doing the math in my head, and I think I went, I think I'm probably one of the guys going. And from there, it was conversations with, my partner, my family, my manager about what's next if this happens. And it was really hard to be prepared because it was so much uncertainty. But I guess the other challenge that came from it was we didn't find out as you would normally in your exit interviews. So we got told, go away, here's a running program, kept doing that, tried to stay fit, thought about finding work, but then you didn't want to find work just in case they said, oh, mate, what do you got a job for? You coming back? So that was really a really interesting time. And then finally got a call from my manager, who's, just said, hey, mate, just a bit of a heads up. I think the call's coming. Be ready. And that was about a week. I heard that. I think I went out for dinner that night with my girlfriend, just, had a few drinks to sort of say, okay, end of the journey. And then I had to wait a week before I actually got the call. So I knew about a week before I actually got delisted that it was coming, which was not a great way to find out, I guess. But, I was just happy I knew what was happening. And then Sam Powell, who's a list manager, gave me a call, said, can you come in, mate? Which I think everyone knows what that means. Sat down at a table with him and Bevo, and essentially just said, look, mate, there's not a spot on the list for you going forward. Thanks very much for your time. And I had a couple of things I was able to get off my chest, which I'm really happy that I did, because I'd hate to sit on that without having said that. And, I was really grateful for my time there. Still really close with a lot of the guys there. But, yeah, that conversation, I think, happens to, 6-7 footballs at each club every year. So the statistics generally show it's going to at some point it's going to be you, and just had to deal with that.
It sounds like you've dealt with that in a fantastic way, which is good to see. And I guess getting back to some of the more positives of your football career, your debut was in Mars Stadium in Ballarat. You kicked a goal in your first game as well. What was that sort of like for you?
Yeah, I think Ballarat is a very interesting, bizarre place to make your debut. I think you always dream of running out into the G in front of 90,000 for your first game. And I remember getting told on the Thursday that I was going to play, which is pretty exciting, and checked the forecast for Ballarat, and I think it said about 7 degrees, which was just fantastic. I wore screw-ins for the first time ever, I think, which, battered and bruised my feet for the rest of the week following. So, kicking the goal was super exciting. I remember taking the mark. I think Bont kicked it in, and I had Dan Houston on my back and sort of felt him slip over. So I knew I was flying by myself, and, was able to pull it in and grab the ball as tight as possible, and went back. I think I was probably 35 straight in front. So it was a really easy kick. And I'm pretty sure I towed it, kept really low, just scraped over the line. But as soon as I hit it, I thought this should have the journey. And Toby McLean was right next to me and gave him a big hug. And it was a really special moment. I think we lost that day, but driving back to Melbourne after I had dinner with, some close friends and family, after that, I don't think I could stop smiling. Just at, that there's a feeling of relief that you drive back and just think, I'm an AFL footballer now, like officially. They can't take that away from me, and I'll always have this. So that was a really special moment, when I look back over my AFL career.
Now, during the call of that game, Hamish McLaughlin, I think it was, brought up that you sort of had a nickname, the Spiderman. What was that nickname all about, and how did it sort of come about?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I haven't heard it in a while. It came from Stephen Grace, who was a VFL coach for my first couple of years at the Dogs. He used to call me Spider because I had these long arms, and I could sort of cause a bit of disruption with the opposition ball movement with my arm. So he would always get up and do, a highlight to the VFL package. So the AFL guys, if they ever had a clash in games or couldn't get to the game, they could understand how the game looked. And he'd always give nicknames to guys. I think Ed Richards was Flame, always called him Young Flame. And I was Spider. So he's like, and here comes Spider. And so that's sort of where it came from. As I said, haven't heard it in a long time. It was a funny one at the time. But Gracie was he was tremendous at being able to give out pretty good nicknames. But
Who do you think of the Box Hill Hawks has the best nickname at the moment, Fergus?
Oh, geez, it's a good one. I'm trying to run through them. They're all pretty stock standard. Ports, Cav, Thorpe. We're not too creative with any of the nicknames. I tried to get Nissan going for Cav for a while, as in Nissan Kavara. It didn't really catch on. I was pretty chuffed with it, but not much came. Proc, we found that Proc was called the Prince when he was younger, but I don't think he likes it all that much. Shuts it down pretty quickly. So there's one to keep in the back pocket if you ever wanted to stir him up. But I'm trying to think. We don't actually have many good ones. Secco, Will Sexton got Prosecco for a while in pre-season. That was pretty good. But, look, we don't have, I look at our list, we don't have that many intelligent guys to think of really good names. So we're probably, we bat pretty lightly in that aspect.
Yeah, it must be a great culture at the Box Hill Hawks. And I guess moving on to your time at the Hawks, you won the leading goal kicker award at the Box Hill Hawks last year, and also the 3WBC Most Outstanding Player Award. What was that like for you to win both of those awards?
Yeah, it is a real privilege. The goal kicking one, the Paul Bolton medal was really exciting to win. You don't play footy to win individual awards. I'm sure everyone says that. We had a pretty handy side, a handy forward line last year. We had Jekka, who kicked, probably 23, 24 goals last year. He missed a couple of games because he played AFL. Dooch was team of the year last year in the forward line. Callow came in midway through. We had a pretty handy team in that aspect. And, I was really lucky that I was able to get on the end of a few. And sort of, I'd like to think, that was sort of my reputation coming in, that I could kick goals, and potentially why Box Hill sort of looked to bring me in. The 3WBC one was a real surprise. It was an interesting one. We did our awards night on Zoom last year. So you got added into a room where you could talk if you won an award. So I was just listening. I think I was texting Dooch and Ed at that point about a couple of things. And then I sort of got removed and then put into the room as they announced it. I thought, I might have won. And it was really quite a surprise. I think we had a huge bunch of talented guys last year who could have won it. As I mentioned, Jack, I mentioned Dooch. Damo obviously won it. Braden Kilpatrick had a great year. Ed had a great year. Port's really got going towards the end. So we had a really, strong list of players. So it was a real sort of privilege to win that. We'll look back fondly. I talked about, looking back on that first game really fondly. There is, a few select moments in your career that you think, geez, that'll be nice to look back on. And I think those two will be definitely one where you go, geez, it's nice to be able to say that. But at this point in time, with where my career is, you sort of don't want to think too much about your individual achievements. You think more, what can I do to contribute for the team, and where can we go as a group?
What do you think are some of the expectations around the Box Hill Hawks and the team that you have this year for where you can sort of end up, because you're still sitting in the top 8, even though you've lost the last 2 games? Do you think that you can go all the way and win the flag this year?
Yeah, I think you have to have that mindset, that belief that you can. If you don't, then, you're probably not in a successful culture. And I think that's the frustrating thing for us, is there is that belief that we can. So to drop the last 2 in frustrating fashion, like to be down in the last 2 games by sort of 5 goals at quarter time, is just unacceptable. And if we want to sort of see ourselves as a real competitor, which I'd like to think that everyone at our club does, we need to be in those games a lot more. So we'll keep working. We've got Southport this week in what'll be a really tough game. But that'll give us a really strong indication, I think, where we're at. And I hope we really take it up to them. We need to put in a competitive performance regardless of the scoreboard, to show that, the rest of the comp and even ourselves, that we're right there. We've beaten some good sides this year, but we've also lost some games that have been in pretty ugly fashion. So we've got a bit of work to do, but I'd like to think that, we hold ourselves in high standard.
Do you have any specific superstitions before a game of football that you strictly follow?
I have a couple. I've definitely eased off. I was getting drafted, and my first couple of years at the Dogs, I was, just over the top, probably with some superstitions. I've definitely tried to ease that back so I can enjoy, the night leading up to footy and the day of footy. So, I have a couple. I'll have spag bowl the night before a game. We'll generally shave the morning of, which is just a weird one. And then other than that, there's not too much to it. I'll generally have a similar brekkie, and I've a pair of game day jocks that I like to think that I'll wear. But, there's a couple there. I'm sure anyone listening is probably think this guy's a bit crazy, but I think everyone has a couple of little ones, even if they wouldn't like to admit it. So I've got a couple, but yeah, that list used to be much, much longer, 4 or 5 years ago.
It's one of the most funny things talking to people in football, to see what some of their superstitions are. And it's just great to hear that you have such a fun side to you. What do you think that if your teammates could describe you in a couple of words, what do you think they would sort of describe your personality and the way you go about it on the field?
Off the field, I would dare say, if you would say, a pain in the ass. On the field, I'd like to think, I'm reasonably demanding of my teammates. I think we're all there for the same thing, and I definitely have found the right balance. I think now, I'd like to think anyway, of enjoyment in my career. And I'm really lucky that I get to play on the same forward line as Cav, who I've played for a few years with over the journey. And we've got a really nice relationship where I'm more than happy for him to tell me, "Come on, mate, it's time to get going." And I think he'd feel the same way if I went back at him with that. So I'd like to think demanding, but enjoyable, and then I guess just reliable is probably the one thing that every footballer wants to be known as. Whether I've achieved that, probably not yet. I think, as I said, everyone strives to be known as reliable. So week in, week out, can you do it? Hopefully. But yeah, I definitely think the first two are probably where best way to describe me, and hopefully how my teammates would think of me.
And just finally, when you're lining up for goal on the football field, do you ever sort of have a strict set shot routine?
Yeah, I think I've got, I walk back, try and get a general feel. I won't count my steps going back, but forward is generally 6, a bit of a stutter, and then 6 sort of at a bit more of a pace, and then just kick through the footy. I can generally sort of tweak that if, I'm a bit concerned about the distance or the angle, where I need to sort of arc a little bit if I need to on something, or a couple other things. But I try and keep it pretty simple and just make sure I'm focused on me internally and not other things. I think, you can get caught up externally on, who's on the mark, what's happening elsewhere. And that's generally where you'll see mistakes creep in. So just trying to keep everything smooth and worried about my breathing and things like that are generally the things that just help me.
Thank you very much, Fergus, for joining me today on the Footy with Fletch podcast. It's been great to talk to you. All the best for the rest of the season with the Box Hill Hawks.
Thanks very much, Fletch. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.